Good morning, everyone. Firstly, apologies from Martijn Blanken, who's our CEO, who was unfortunately unable to make it. He had various work commitments, so you get me. So my name is Mark Dickinson. I'm the CTO and also acting COO for Neospace Group. I'm going to go into a bit of detail about who Neospace Group is, because I'm sure some of you are unfamiliar. I've also was lucky enough to attend IAC last week and Paris for World Satellite Business Week recently, and I think I'm going to make a few comments about how I observe the industry going forward and what implications that means, especially on the ground segment side, especially around things like sovereignty. That's a key word that we keep hearing these days. So without further ado, I'm going to jump in just a few charts to explain who Neospace Group is, or NSG. I should say that I joined NSG 9 months ago. I came from Inmarsat Viasat, where I spent 25 years, and ran satellite operations for 9 years, and then for the last 5 years was leading the space segment development activities. So it's great to see many friendly faces in the audience. It's great to meet up with ex-colleagues. So NSG was founded only about 18 months or so, actually about 16 months or so ago, by the PIF in Saudi Arabia. Now, I'm sure most of you have heard about the PIF, but for those of you who haven't, it's the Public Investment Fund. It's the sovereign wealth fund of Saudi Arabia, which has been around for over 50 years. And its mandate is essentially to make investments both for financial return, but also to be able to move the economy of Saudi Arabia away from pure petrochemical dollars into a modern ecosystem, and space features very predominantly in that roadmap. So the PIF have around 13 priority sectors, and NSG fits in the aerospace and defense sector. We are being termed the national space champion of Saudi Arabia. Now, you can define that as you want. People have different views about what that could mean. But we see our role very much to be able to maximize the capabilities that Saudi Arabia has today, make investments in the future to build capabilities, both internally, but also then internationally, and bring capabilities and skills into the kingdom. Very much part of the ambition around Vision 2030, moving the Saudi Arabian economy into a very high-tech global player. So in terms of what the NSG strategy is, I mentioned it a bit. It's very much around being able to diversify, to use the investment dollars that the kingdom has to make wise investments in technology and capabilities going forward, to be able to innovate, to be able to solve the kingdom's needs, but also there's a real ambition here to become a global space player. I think it's fair to say that Saudi Arabia isn't a global space player today, and it really has an ambition over the next 10 years to become that. Also, a key aspect around jobs and skills. Saudi Arabia is a very young country, under 50% of the population under 30, and I can tell you one of the best things about the job I've had in the last 9 months is the young people. The talent, the ambition, very well educated, very ambitious, and about trying to connect the dots between that ambition to execution is, I see as part of my job. So we have a very illustrious board. His Excellency Al Swaha, who is our chairman. He's also the Minister for Telecommunications. We have a Deputy Minister of His Excellency Al Tamimi, who was the Governor of CST, which is the regulator of Saudi Arabia. We have like the CTO of Aramco. We have a number of leading entrepreneurs on the board, as well as PIF. So we really have a very heavyweight board there to try and help us on our execution. So in terms of company objectives, very much we are a PIF sovereign company, and the number one objective is to return financial returns to PIF. We're not an R&D research house. We're a commercial company. We're trying to leverage the capabilities that the kingdom has today in orbit and maximize those returns, because it's been a rather fragmented activity so far, and NSG is here to try and help pull it together. But also have a roadmap, which I'll come on to in terms of how we create new technology, how we do innovation, how we work with partners, especially internationally, And as part of that partnerships, how do we bring skills and capability within the kingdom for the long term? This is not just about buying more capabilities from outside the kingdom and money flowing one way. It's about an investment to be able to get skills and opportunities back within the kingdom to give jobs and skills for the kingdom in the future. And I see a real ambition for the kingdom wanting to be that key, to be one of the, let's say, top 10 space players in the world over the next couple of decades or so. So in terms of NSG itself, we have 4 pillars. One is around satellite communications, both geostationary. The kingdom has an asset called SGS-1, which is very capable Ka-band spacecraft. NSG is essentially taking responsibility for that asset and serving the kingdom's government needs, but also commercializing that capacity. And we have a business, especially in IFC at the moment, but we see that expanding into areas like enterprise, working with constellation providers. I'm not sure we'll be spending 10 billion on a sovereign constellation, because I'm not sure the world needs another sovereign constellation at that scale, but how we can work with key partners and where we think about really getting return on investment for maybe much smaller scale constellation activities or constellations within inside someone else's constellation. Geospatial, I'll touch upon in a minute. I say we've only been going 16 months, but with 750 people. That's quite a large organisation already. A lot of that comes through some acquisitions that's happened, and in particular one large acquisition at the beginning of the setup in Earth observation. I'll touch upon the capabilities we have there. Aspects around PNT. So we all know, we probably don't, PNT is many different types of solutions, from a GNSS system to an SBAS system to an augmentation system. P is not the same as T. And understanding exactly what capabilities a nation needs around the different aspects around that, and how it drives things like smart cities, smart agriculture, automated driving, what capabilities the kingdom needs to develop to be able to fulfill those other technical ambitions. They say you don't make money by just throwing up navigation systems, you make money on the downstream side, and where NSG fits in that. And then also part of our mandate is to start a VC fund. So we want to start a fund here that we can essentially make investments into new technology to essentially feed into our pipelines. So I'm not going to go into detail. 16 months has been a very busy 16 months, let's just put it that way. We've done a number of acquisitions, and we've signing up customers on the commercial side. So yeah, the pace is really high. We're growing fast, and we're trying to really deliver on some very ambitious objectives. So an eye chart. I'm not going to go into this in too much detail, but I put this when I said I joined NSG, and people were going, "Who's NSG?" I put this chart together to try and explain who we were to someone who's not familiar with the Saudi ecosystem. At the top there, I say it's an eye chart. You're not going to read all that. There's many stakeholders in the kingdom. At the very top, there's the Saudi Supreme Space Council. It's a great name. I love it. The Crown Prince sits as the top of that. So that's creating the space policy, essentially. Then we have many government, commercial, pseudo-government entities within the kingdom, from the Ministry of Telecommunications, the Saudi Space Agency, the regulator, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, regulators for aviation, for example. We provide services in the aviation sector. So GACA is the equivalent to the FAA, essentially. And then we have many stakeholders, both academic and institutional. Things like CACST and CAUST are very well-established organizations within the kingdom who are doing a lot of space work today, and it's about how we work with them. So there's NSG in the middle, fully owned by PIF. On the left-hand side, I'm saying, how do we get to 750 people? Well, you get there quickly through acquisitions. We acquired a company called Tacna ETS, which had been going for around 11 years, very much on the downstream Earth observation side, and that's been brought inside the organization and called NSG Geospatial Services. We recently purchased a company called Up42 of Airbus, based in Germany, who are a data marketplace for Earth observation data. I'll touch upon a bit more in a second about what they do. And we've recently announced last couple of weeks acquisition of DI, who are a French company who provide platforms for in-flight connectivity. So we're trying to tie up the end user with the space infrastructure and the glue between the two. So on the right-hand side, we're predominantly, at the moment today, we're a downstream player. But we're moving into they call it midstream. Midstream was new to me when I joined NSG. It's own and operate, essentially. We're going to have, we've got this geostationary asset from the kingdom called SGS-1, which is now operated by us, but we're going to be adding to that across the different verticals. So we're going from the sort of that downstream into midstream. What we're probably not going to be doing is upstream, the manufacturing side. But the PIF has around 75 portfolio companies. There's plenty of sister companies to NSG who have that manufacturing capability today. So it's far better that they do the manufacturing side and that we operate and exploit those assets. And then we have the different we've got those 4 verticals there and a bit more detail under them. So very much multi-band, multi-orbit, the same sort of concepts that many people are going down into the SATCOM side. IoT is a very important market for the kingdom. You can imagine the sort of the Aramcos of the world have a lot of infrastructure that needs to be monitored remotely. I think was an ongoing discussion internally about whether that's a downstream or midstream activity. I think one of the announcements, obviously, the $18 billion that SpaceX is spending on some MSS spectrum S-band for direct-to-device connectivity is a real statement of intent. And understanding how these 5G NTN networks will be deployed in the future, do you want to build another system which is like that, or do you want to be able to exploit those networks as a communication channel and find your value far more on the downstream side, the user terminal side, the value-added services side, and solving the customer's problems? So I think the direct-to-device is obviously one of the 2 hot topics at the moment, sovereignty as the other one. Exactly how this plays out over the next 24 months is going to be very interesting, but a statement of intent of spending $18 billion on what's essentially 50 megahertz of S-band spectrum is a real one, and I think it's woken people up in terms of direct-to-device is a thing that's coming, and maybe coming at real scale if you believe the filing for 14,000 spacecraft flying at 330 kilometers. Earth observation, we're very much on the downstream side. I'll go into a bit more detail, but on the own and operate side, the kingdom will have some geospatial assets. We may have some geospatial assets, and we may be operating them, fusing the data together from them, commercializing them, serving the kingdom's need, but then commercializing them when they're not within the kingdom. Navigation, I've sort of touched upon. There's many flavors of that, and it's always a good discussion about where you can deliver sovereign capabilities in PNT and exactly what capabilities you need. And then we have the sovereign wealth fund, the VC fund aspect. So one of the things I found is that talking to the key stakeholders in the kingdom, a lot of discussion is around sovereignty. And sovereignty can mean many different things. So we built a model that, in fact, we presented at Global Mill Satcom last year, so apologies if you were there in the audience then, of a 6-class model. You can think of it a bit like a TRL type of model. From class 1, which is essentially utilizing external capabilities, non-sovereign capabilities for internal needs, all the way up to class 6, which is full custodianship of everything that goes in your system. And there's probably only a few countries in the world who achieve class 6. But it's a journey. And one of the explanations I'm doing in terms of sovereignty is how do you get from a class 2 situation to a class 4 or class 5? Unlike TRLs, it's not something you have to do sequentially. You can jump levels. But I find this a useful model when talking to key stakeholders about what sovereignty is needed. and about the investment that's required. Sovereignty doesn't come for free. You have to make investments to achieve a level of sovereignty. Where do you want sovereignty? Is it just in your neck of the woods, or do you want a more global capability? So I'm sure all of you have seen the advent of like small GEO spacecraft to serve sovereign needs, because it's hard for a country to launch its own constellation. I think only 5% of Starlink satellites ever see the US at any one time, so it's a highly uneconomic way of deploying capability. Large GEOs can be expensive and probably aren't optimized for serving just one country if you're serving needs. So you see the advent of these small GEOs in the 1,000-kilogram class. And I think that puts a lot of interest on the ground segment side, because now ground segment starts becoming a much fractional share of the cost, far higher than it was with a big GEO when you may have had a handful of ground stations. Some of the systems you're seeing are, even from a 1,000-kilogram spacecraft, getting hundreds of gigabits per second of potential capacity. Capacity is a marketing dark art type of thing. You can make any number you want up with the assumptions you have. But let's say 100 gigabits per second. What you need then is a lot of gateways to bring that capacity down. And that's difficult from a sovereign system, because do you put them in the same country? And therefore, if you have a KA system, do you use KA gateways? And therefore, you're using a lot of potential spectrum up for the feeder links, so it comes as a high opportunity cost. Do you move to QV band? Do you even go to optical links? And I think from an ground segment architectural point, these are key questions that people are going to be considering when they're looking at these sovereign type of small GEO type of systems. Optical's great, but if you're a relatively small country, what's the probability you're going to be clouded out? Do you have redundancy outside the kingdom? Then does that degrade your sovereignty class? Those are exactly the type of discussions that we're having. So yeah, I think ground segment has an increasing role in the business case now that we need so many gateways, and it's becoming harder to coordinate, and we need to look at other frequency bands to make a really optimized system. Yeah, let's say it's an active discussion that we're having, but I know many other people are having as well. I've seen some systems, it's a 1,000-kilogram spacecraft, but assuming 35 gateways. How do you manage 35 gateways? That's a challenge in itself. How do you manage rain fade? And so I know there's people in this room who are looking at exactly that sort of problem. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion that we have over the coming days. Maybe just a bit of a use case to show you what we're trying to do. So I mentioned we have a very well-established Earth observation business in the downstream side, serving primarily the kingdom's needs, so the government needs. And we know that we want to grow this business, both in the kingdom, but also internationally. So to do that, we bought a company called Up42. So they say they were started by Airbus, and they're very much the marketplace function, which has been talked a lot about in Earth observation. It's matching up the Earth observation data providers with the analytics capability, with the customers, and sort of the analytics part of it, but really focus on delivering solutions to customer problems than just an image or just some simple analysis. It's really trying to answer questions that customers have. We found in the Earth observation world that if you just try and sell an image, you're not going to get very far. It's really understanding the customer's problem and then how you deliver a interface that's easy to work with to be able to deliver those answers. So we have a catalog. So if you have a question, you can ask the platform the question. It may have the data already, so it goes to catalog. No retasking required. If tasking is required, it has a very nice user interface to allow you to be able to say, I want this area with this type of sensors at this time, and it will do all the tasking activities. Data management, but very importantly, the analytical models that you put on top. So AI and machine learning, whatever you want to call it. It's about delivering the end results to the customer. So we're super excited about this, and the way the model's working, essentially we have a data marketplace for inside the kingdom that the kingdom users use, and we have a data marketplace for outside the kingdom. So this is, again, making an investment in capabilities and scaling it. And as part of NSG's foundation, we were given the mandate of 5-year exclusivity, essentially, for serving the kingdom's geospatial needs through this. So that's a way of being able to have an investment to be able to build capabilities and then deliver them at an international scale. So when we talk about customers' problems, these are the type of things that we're doing. So the geospatial services team have great capabilities. They've essentially built the Google Maps of Saudi Arabia, called Neo Maps. So this is a sovereign play again. If you have your government who wants to be reliant upon a navigation capability or a mapping capability, they don't particularly want to be able to rely upon just Google, for example, for that. So you build the internal capabilities. So we've done that. Things around urban planning, a lot of capabilities around change detection, 2 and 3D change detection. So urban planning can be just simple as a civil government agency wanting to know when someone's building a building and they don't have planning permission for. It can do that type of activities. And the environmental side, so oil slick monitoring, for example, understanding how oil slicks will move, understanding water quality are very important problems that especially the countries in the region face. Crop yield, for example, how do you actively manage crop yields? And that's one somewhere where you can see that actually you have an Earth observation capability, you might have an IoT capability, and you might have a comms capability across these verticals. Can we create products and solutions which are really differentiated in that way? So we can take an image, we can take soil moisture information in real time, and we can have autonomous farming activities. That's using all the different verticals. And there's not many companies in the world, I think, have that sort of that width. Okay, we're building up the depth in the different verticals, but we do have that. We do straddle across many different capabilities. So, no, I'm a bit running on out of time. So I'm going to summarize here. So joining NSG has been a super exciting time. I've really enjoyed coming to the region. For me, the biggest thing has been the ambition, and especially in the younger generation. Seeing a population who really wants to take their country forward into a very modern, high-tech company is really is great to see. And I hope I'm not standing here in 2 years, 3 years' time. I hope you have a Saudi national who's standing here telling you this, because if that's happened, I've done my job. So yeah, we're very much in building up the infrastructure phase. And that includes both on the space side, on the data side, but also on the ground side. If you're talking about mega constellations coming to the kingdom, how do you manage that? Do you have a proliferation of gateways for every person, fiber connectivity for every person, or do you try and find some way of consolidating that to have a sort of a shared cost model? At the moment, Starlink and Kuiper and such don't have access to the kingdom through market access, and those are discussions that are ongoing at the moment. Sovereign capabilities, and number one goal here, okay, is produce financial returns, but also to provide the kingdom with the capabilities it needs to function, as both from a commercial side, but also from a government side. You know the region is it's a challenging region at the moment. Things like navigation is a highly interference environment's quite high, spoofing is quite high, tracking, dark fleet vessel type of stuff. There's a lot of challenges out there, so making sure that there's the capabilities for that. But also, again, then looking internationally. This is not just purely about an internal play. It's about how we develop capabilities and then exploit them on the commercial stage. And partnerships are fundamental. I spend a lot of my time talking to international partners about how we can work together and deliver capabilities. And as part of that, if there's an investment or there's a contract and so on, what in the longer term is the capabilities that can come into the kingdom to give that little long-term, multi-generational type of capabilities. Yeah, so it's a really exciting time. We also look to start up this venture capital fund, which is an interesting aspect to be able to make some investment decisions about where we think technologies can go in the future and see these companies flourish and then be part of those pillars that we have in our roadmap. Yeah, so thank you for your time. It's great to be here, and yeah, and I can answer any questions if there's 5 minutes for questions, or you want to move on. Up to you. 5 minutes. Anyone got a question?
I don't want you shouting. Okay. Renato Goodfellow, Commercis. I just ask if that old solution element of high-altitude platforms is now long forgotten or may make a comeback.
Well, I think they have a role, especially from a sovereign perspective. They can have a role because it's quite a tactical way to solve a problem without having to deploy a lot of capital in space. And I think anything you can, my view, anything, the broad rules, anything you can do on the ground, try and do it on the ground or terrestrially, rather than putting things in space, because that's an expensive endeavor. So now high-altitude platforms are certainly could be part of the ecosystem here. I should say that coming from IAC last week in Sydney, you have the space agencies there, you have the NASA's, JAXA's, the UK Space Agency, but you also have all the commercial sector around trying to serve those needs, whether it's rovers, whether it's comm systems around the moon or Mars, in-orbit manufacturing. I think in time, I'd add another pillar on those 4 pillars I showed around sort of in-orbit capabilities, because I think that's maturing rapidly, and I think there's some really interesting business opportunities there. And I think Neospace Group should be playing in those. It's not there today because it's not one of the sort of the traditional space sectors, but super interesting to see some of the, especially in-orbit manufacturing, there's some really interesting capabilities coming along. And so maybe that's part of the venture capital fund that we can start developing an additional vertical in the future.
Hi, Lawrence Russell, Data Center Dynamics. You spoke briefly about the education behind the people powering these technologies. Could you just talk, most countries speak of a skills gap. Mm-hmm. Do you see any challenges there? Are there any particular objectives for what kind of expertise you want to build up? You speak about all these technologies, surely that's going to have a lot of manpower behind it. How are you educating that workforce?
Absolutely, and the skills aspect is fundamental here. This is, it's a long-term play. You can't just building capabilities without the skills to operate them, without the skills to be able to build them in the country in the future is going to be key. So there's many very high-quality universities, and there's many the teams who work with in my team are super well educated. This is not an education problem in terms of that. It's about getting exposure to the industry, understanding the industry, and that capabilities. So at the moment, yeah, I think one of the challenges is getting the right, bright, young Saudi nationals into the company with the right skill sets. But it's a training program. We take graduates in from the universities, train them up. But yeah, this is, and whether there's cross-training activities to be able to, if we make an investment in some capabilities, there's a cross-training aspect to that we can send a team to sit with the prime or the manufacturer to be able to get experience in terms of how that works, and then they come back and then they can do it in the kingdom in the future. So yeah, skills is one of the very top aspects. Many of the people will have PhDs from US, UK, for example, say the quality of education is exceptional, both in the kingdom and outside. It's about joining the dots between what's the capabilities and the industry on the international side here and the youngsters coming through the education system here. And that's what I'm trying to help do. I say, in 2 years' time, 3 years' time, Saudi national should be here, not me.
Michael Lookin from TTP. Mark, you don't see the opportunity for the kingdom to provide sovereign launch capabilities, so launch pad somewhere in the desert of that peninsula?
Launch is hard in the region because you typically need a large bit of ocean to launch over in case there's a problem. You don't particularly want a launch vehicle to come down on someone else's country, and Saudi Arabia doesn't have a huge amount of sea where you've got a large amount of. You can do horizontal launch. You could do something. You could look at it in that way, fly out over somewhere and then launch. So I think launch is certainly of interest. It's a region where it's quite hard to see. You can't build a Cape Canaveral. There's nowhere to build a launch site with a large multi-thousand-kilometer ocean to launch over. If you go north, you're going over Europe. If you go south, you're going over other countries as well. And yeah, it's launch is not. I should say the Saudi Space Agency look after a lot of activities for sort of non-commercial. We're primarily focused on the commercial side, so Saudi Space Agency does a lot of the exploration and launch stuff would feature under there.